Well, hello. This is another Black History Conversations. We're in our Windrush series at the moment. Last week we were recognising the departure of Windrush. I'm just going to share my screen when Simon makes it possible for me, so that we can start off the session. So, yeah, here we are. There we are then. So this week we're going to recognise that the Empire Windrush was on the high seas by the time we got through 74 years ago. So I'm just going to enlarge this as well. Because I'm in Australia, I always start with, oops, next one. So we'll go back to that. So I acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which I'm currently living, the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation. I recognise their elders, past, present and future. This land belongs to the sovereign people of the First Nations, and it was never ceded. It always was, and it always will be. So this acknowledgement is something that you do at the beginning of every meeting. You do on the television, the programmes will have the recognition of the land. But interestingly, and why I've put this on, is that Coles, which is our big supermarket, one of our big supermarkets here, Woolworths is the other one, and Safeways, but Coles is one of them. And on the receipt at Coles, it says, Coles Group acknowledges the traditional custodians of the country throughout Australia. We recognise their strength and pay respects to the elders, past, present and emerging. The Coles Group extends that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people and recognise their rich cultures and continuing connection to the land and waters. Things are changing here in Australia, I feel. And the flags that you can see there, the one with black, yellow and red is the Aboriginal flag, and the other flag is the flag of the Torres Strait Islanders. Okay, so this week especially is, I'm just going to introduce this, National Reconciliation Week. It's about being brave and making a change, and my word, we've got some considerable changes going on here. Just one thing to say that happened during this last week was that Knox City Council, which isn't far from here, held a Sorry Day ceremonies on the 26th of May. Sorry Day is a seriously important day here because it's a day when the country says sorry to the stolen generation. People, some of them even my age, Aboriginal children, perhaps with mixed heritage, who were stolen from their families, physically taken from their families and put into missions or made to live in white families and were not allowed to understand their culture and their heritage. So Sorry Day is a seriously important event, and there's a smoking ceremony going on there, which is an Aboriginal-led ceremony to cleanse and recognise at any event. But interestingly, with our new Australian Labor Party, I don't know if it got on the telly in your countries, but it was and they are in complete control. They don't have to, have a coalition. The new Australian Labor Party ministers were sworn in at great length. But Linda Burney became the Minister for Indigenous Australians, and she's actually wearing a kangaroo skin wrap round her. And all of the ministers could bring whatever they wanted to swear in with. So some of them brought the Quran, some of them brought the Bible, whatever it might be. But it is a significantly different Parliament, and the new Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese, spoke about the dear me, can't remember, but the most important statement about the Australian recognition of the statement from Uluru. I do apologise, very late at night here in Australia. So interesting and exciting things are going on here in recognition of the Indigenous peoples of Australia. But just to remember that through blackbirding, which was the name that slavery was called here, through slavery, people were taken from the islands in the north of Australia to the sugarcane fields, and some of them were put on the missions there. And so in turn, there's a Facebook page called Welcome to Country, and what you may call it is an interesting series to people to catch up. So there's lots and lots of information here. Then moving on, each week since the start of the Russian invasion of Ukraine, we've recognised the people of Ukraine, and our thoughts and good wishes are with them. And this was an interesting and beautiful photograph, I thought. Right, so back to today. So I'm Liz Millman from Learning Links International. I'm joined by my colleague Simon Faringo from Belong Nottingham, and lots of other great folks today who are going to tell their stories, so that's good. So it was 74 years ago that the Empire Windrush was on the high seas, and sharing the stories of the journey and what it meant to so many is what we're about. Next week, we've got an author who's written the story of Windrush, so she's joining us, and we're also recognising the departure last week and looking forward to hearing about the plans for a ceremony to recognise the 75th anniversary in Kingston. So we also will be looking at some of the issues with the Windrush generation, like the barrel children or the parcel children, as I think was referred to last week, and what the problems are that folks are facing, and any other issues related to Windrush. So we recognised this last week, and this I've worked out now how to share these PowerPoints on the website, Black History Conversations. So these links are live, so that when you get onto the website, you can actually link through to any of these things. Pages. So there was an article about the this in 2021. I haven't seen if there's any articles this year about it. And we recognised last week that the tickets were bought, and there was, front page news that 900 people were leaving on the Windrush. Then we looked at this interesting plan from Peter Plowman, and you can get through to this on Sea Breezes. There's a lot of information there, and it actually shows exactly where the Windrush stopped on this particular journey that it made. Bill Hearn joined us last week, and he was talking about people on the passenger list of the Windrush, and he's trying to research the stories of all the passengers. And then I don't know if anyone from last week's had a chance to look this one up, but this is from the New African magazine, and I'm interested in this different perspective on the story of Windrush and other African history stories. Now, in a little while, I don't know, maybe you'd like to start with this, June Elizabeth. Do you want to read a little bit from the Benjamin Zephaniah's book now?
If you want me to.
That would be a good way to start, I think.
Okay.
Last week
I'll really condense it, because of time. I'll just highlight it. Yes.
Okay.
Is that okay?
Very much indeed. Thank you.
Right. Last week, when I read from The Windrush Child by Benjamin Zephaniah, he was born in Maroontown, and when he was a baby, before he was born, his dad had gone to Jamaica. So I ended by reading that he had a postcard from his dad, and the postcard was of a ship. The picture was of a ship, and the ship was called the Windrush ship. And his dad showed him that he was a Windrush child. But what I found out is that he didn't want to leave Jamaica, right? Because his mum had always told him, because he didn't know his dad, that his dad would be coming back. So he was brought up by his grandmother, and like he said, I didn't know much about England. This is chapter 5. I didn't know much about England. At school, I learned about some of their kings and queens and about the big British Empire, but I didn't know what it was really like. He was told to read, he read nursery rhymes and things like that. So the reason why he didn't want to leave Jamaica, he says, at our home in Maroon Town, we could always hear the sounds of birds chirping, or as if talking to each other, the sounds of crickets, frogs, and croaking lizards. Even in the middle of the night, it was never completely silent. We had a mango tree, a grape tree, an orange tree, a coconut tree, and many banana trees. Every day, I'll try a different fruit to see when they were ripe and ready for everyone else to eat. That was my excuse. So I would be told to stay away from that fruit until it fell from the tree. But for some strange reason, I always went back and I'd keep getting bellyache. We always grew cashew nuts, yams, sweet potatoes, pumpkins, and lots of other vegetables. People travel from all over Maroon Town to taste our food. I didn't need a big house. Playing on the grounds around our small house and running around in the bush meant that my clothes were always dirty, but my clothes I wore to school were spotless. In classes, we had to pay attention to the teacher. We could only speak when spoken to. We walked from one place to the other in silence. We had to be polite at all times. When we spoke to the teachers, we had to call them madam or sir. Although there were many white people living in Jamaica, we didn't often see them. But in every classroom in school, there was a picture of the Queen. We were taught about many of the kings and queens of Britain. We even had to sing English nursery rhymes. But when I went home, my mum and my grandma would teach me Jamaican history and Jamaican nursery rhymes. So not long after, his mum got a letter from the dad, and she said to Leonard, that was his name, that they were going to England. He was quite upset because he thought his dad was coming back here. So you can imagine leaving all those fruits that he didn't really want to leave to come to England. So when he left his grandma, she said, "You must be a good boy over there, you hear?" "Yes, Grandma," I replied. "And you must study hard so we can be proud of you, all right?" "Yes, Grandma," he said. I wanted to tell her how much I didn't want to go, but I knew I'd lost that argument. I was still holding Grandma's hand as she hugged Mum. And by the time that had come, I reluctantly released Grandma's hand and walked to the road to get the bus to town. From the centre of Maroon Town, we took an old bus to Kingston, the capital of Jamaica. I had only been to Kingston once before when I was 2 years old. I don't remember, but I was told that I hated riding by the bus. Now, what's happened now? They spent the day in Kingston and now they're getting ready to go to the ship. I stood on the harbour looking up at the ship and I couldn't believe how big it was. It was taller than any other building I've seen. Wow, it's so big. Is this the Empire Windrush? No, said his mum. The ship called a Rosa Star. So that's another ship that came to England to bring him and his mum. So when he came to England, he was very disappointed because his dad lived in one room, and he's got to get used to going to school and living a different life completely. So I'll leave it like that now for another time. So we've got to chapter 7 and 8.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. And I'm finding it fascinating. Benjamin Zephaniah has written this fictional story of the child who leaves Jamaica, and fiction is really important when you're trying to get the feeling of things and really understand and engage with children. So that's a really good way to do that. June Elizabeth, thank you very much indeed. And a little bit later on, you're going to tell us a little bit about your work and the things you're doing for Windrush. Thank you very much indeed. I'm just going to check, McCarthy, how is your connection?
Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Okay. We can hear you. Okay. Now, over the next few weeks, you're going to tell us about several things. One thing's your own personal family stories, and the other things about Rastafari and how you linked with that. So, which would you like to talk about today?
Okay, I'll go with the stories.
Okay.
The Left Behinders.
You've got a big family story. Okay, the Left Behinders then.
Okay, so
hear about that, McCarthy.
Okay, so my family they grew up in Gibraltar, St. Anne's, around Gibraltar, St. Anne's. Some grew up in a place called Jackland, which is about 5 miles away from Gibraltar. So I interviewed my nephew, who is now to 63, I think he is. He's 63 now, but he was left. So I spoke to him this week. His story was that there was 3 of them. So my sister, she left and came to England, I think it was about 1963, 62, 63. And she'd left 3 children behind. The 3 children was 2 nieces and my nephew. My nephew was the middle child of them, and yeah. So they grew up with our grandmother. So there was my 3 sisters were there, and then the nephews and nieces were there. Yeah, and there was a big house, so there was others there as well, cousins, some of them whom I've never met. Anyway, my sister came over 62. Eldest daughter came over in, I think it was about 68. The youngest daughter died of pneumonia when she was, I think she was 4 years old. And so it just left Devon there. He grew up with his grandmother for a while, then grandmother passed, and then he went to his father's family. And basically he said he wasn't treated well there at all. He had to do everything, lots of chores in the morning. He was the only one who could read. So he'd read all the letters to them, etc., etc. Basically, at the age of 13, he ran away. So at the age of 13, he ran away. He went to Kingston and grew up in Kingston. When I asked him, did he ever get any letters from his parents? He said no, they never got any letters. That the grandparents, they'd moan that, how come they're not getting no support, and they've got to look after, these children and not getting any support. So yeah, he basically ran away. He said he was doing farming and that kind of thing. So he ran away, grew up in Kingston, and also a place called Central Village. and he said he never got any communication from his parents. So, for example, when he was at school, there were other children who were getting parcels from England, but he never got any parcels. And basically, he didn't tell anyone that his parents were in England, because so the children thought that his parents were in country, but they were actually in England, but he wasn't actually getting anything from England. So, you know, it's like he kind of grew up like, you know, resenting the fact that, you know, he was looked after. He said he met his dad, I think in the 80s. I think he said his dad came over to Jamaica, and when he came over to Jamaica, he can remember him hitting him. You know what I mean? And he said he said that he wanted to go for it, you know, fight his dad kind of thing. So when he eventually came over, he came over in 1992. I think he was about 32 years old. He'd never seen any pictures of his mother. And so when he came over, he was a man. And so really and truthfully, there wasn't really much of a connection with his mom. And that kind of neglect kind of carried on, you know what I mean? So they always had him like he's a bad man and so on and so forth. He had 3 sisters that were born in England. So I asked him what was it like with them, and he said at first they were all right, but afterwards they kind of, you know, kind of excluded him as well. So he's kind of grown up. I mean, you speak to him now, and he's just full of anguish, and I think the experience traumatized him. You know what I mean? Traumatized him so much. I think he suffers from angina, you know what I mean? So yeah, that's his story. He doesn't speak to it. I don't think he speaks to any of his sisters now. Only the one that was born in Jamaica with him. And he does speak to his father. Mother passed. And when his mother passed, that's when she kind of made peace and apologized to him for how she treated him. Yeah, that's his story. My cousin
McCarthy,
is what, 60, I think. Yep.
yeah, McCarthy, just to say that is the most incredible story, and I thank you so much for talking with your family. McCarthy and I have worked on many projects, and McCarthy is supporting us on this, in that he's doing some research so that we can pull together some of these stories, maybe stories that are even more difficult to tell than some of the other ones. McCarthy, perhaps if you join us next week, can you then tell us the next story next week?
Yeah, no problem. No problem. No.
That would be incredible. I don't know if any of you have got any comments that you want to make, but that was just amazing.
And definitely, it resonated with me quite a bit, actually, because I came to England. Well, my mom and dad came in the 50s, when I was a baby, actually, and I lived with my grandmother. And then my mom came to get me and my brother from Jamaica when I was 9, and my brother was 10. And exactly as McCarthy said, I didn't want to leave my grandmother because she'd nurtured me from a baby, really, because my mom came to England when I was 6 months old. So I didn't know another mom. I knew I had a mom in England, and she used to send parcels and stuff, but there was not that heartical connection as I had with my grandmother. So when my mom decided to bring us to England, I really didn't want to come to England because I was leaving my grandmother. And you see, and I think that story is the story for many of us. And I mean, when we talk about Windrush, you know, and Windrush talks about the compensation of people who might not have managed to gain work because they didn't have documentation, or they went back to Jamaica and couldn't come back. But how do you compensate people like many of us who lost our parents, and then when you came, the relationship was totally broken, really, because you were leaving your mom that you knew as your mom, who was your grandmother, because I mean, most of us called our grandmother Mama because she was our mother. And then we came, and there was other siblings as I came, and there was other siblings in England. And so it was just finding where you had to fit into the new family structure. So yeah, so it is it is the story for many. It is our story. We talk about his story, but it is our story. And, you know, when I speak it, I know I'm not on my own in speaking it, because, you know, when listening to McCarthy, it was like, actually, it was like he was speaking to me, even though I didn't go through, you know, my grandmother loved us unconditionally, and I'm very grateful and blessed for that, because it wasn't the same for a lot of other children. But yes, interesting. And then I came to England. It was like we came to Dudley in the West Midlands. It was like, oh my gosh, when do I reach England that we've been taught about in school? You know, the palace and the beautiful country. And Dudley was really smoggy and grey, and it was cold. So I'll hand back over to you, Liz. But yeah, it resonated quite significantly, because I even came to England on a ship as well, the Escania, in 1964. So yeah, really interesting.
Thank you very much indeed, Nadia. That was so interesting. And yes, I know Dudley well. And
oh, do you?
At that time, I lived in Wolverhampton for a long time, so I know what it's like. But yes, that England that you were taught about was so very different. Just welcoming my colleague Caroline Sansom's joining us now from North Wales. Thank you, Caroline. It's lovely you can join us. That's beautiful. Okay, well, thank you very much, Nadia. Is there anybody else who wanted to come in with the resonance from?
Yeah, I'll just say this. I won't make it a story. I'll let somebody else talk. But I did some research, and I interviewed a lot of people like that were left behind by their parents. And as Nadia said, and Mr. Selassie, similar stories, but I have got a lot of good news stories as well, as to balance. When they came to England, it's the same story, that they were held back in their education was held back. They were put lower than their stream, you know. And my parents came here 54. So the difference was I was born here, but then 10 years later, no, when I was 6, I went to live in Jamaica with my grandparents. So that's another story.
Fascinating. Thank you so much. And that story about children put back and the need for Saturday schools is an area that we can perhaps touch on one week. That's just fascinating. Okay, so Houghton, you have joined us today from Plymouth, and I know you're talking about going into schools and helping children understand some of this history. So would you like to share a bit of your story?
Okay, thank you again. A real pleasure being with this group. You know, so far the story resonates for me, because again, I came here in 1973. I was 9.5 years of age. I, in many regards, grew up with my grandmother, who I called Mom. So when I came to join my mother here in South London, it was difficult because I was calling, it's funny because I don't think I was actually calling her Mom. And I remembered sort of being told off and reminded that I'm your mother. The woman that you call your mother is your gran. And so for me, it was a wake-up call. It was cold. I remembered arriving here in Heathrow Airport on, was it BOAC aeroplane? And it was October and it was freezing. And if you imagined, I came dressed in more like a safari suit, a two-piece safari suit, short sleeves, and honestly cold. But if I was to now fast forward, in 2010, I moved from London. I was actually living in Crystal Palace and in South London, and came to Plymouth and began having problems with the Home Office and the Department of Work and Pensions, and I couldn't understand why. And in many regards, this was due to new laws that they were bringing in, which was trying to keep out the Europeans from coming to the UK. So in 2014, this law kicked in. But in between that, in 2013, I was sanctioned by the Department of Work and Pensions. And then I began getting, I would say, threatening letters from the Home Office. And I thought, okay, I need to resolve this. The Citizen Advice Bureau was not, they're meant to be there to help you, but sadly, wasn't very helpful. And I went through years of being, I would say, sanctioned and not allowed to work, and the threat of being deported. And I was not even allowed to travel from Plymouth to London, where all my family are, my mother and my siblings and my children. And so to a degree, I was on my own and I did the best I could. And the way forward for me was self-employment, because I was not, for me, I'd lost my passport over the years. And so I didn't have this passport to prove who I was. And that I'm Newton Lindsay, yes, from Jamaica, but it became a real burden for me. And I remembered approaching so many different organizations, and to a degree, there's a group that known as Devon and Cornwall Refugee Support Group based here in Plymouth. And I went along to this group, explained my situation, and this young man by the name of H-U-G-H, I don't pronounce my H's very well, but he was very helpful. And he worked on my case by trying to resolve it by getting me a NTL, with basically a certificate to prove of that you are here legally, and to just to help to assist you. And now we're talking about many years of painstakingly finding documents. I had to provide 47 years of documentation to then prove to the Home Office that yes, one, I'm here legally, and that yes, I went through the old school system. Again, my schooling was held back because it was deemed that yes, you're a Jamaican, you don't speak very good English, and you don't understand you could say the subjects, which was very untrue. And somehow, I would say it was in 2018, I remembered when all of a sudden Windrush became the news. And I was then told that, oh, actually it seems that you're one of these Windrush generations. And luckily for me, with support again from Devon and Cornwall Refugee Support Group and my local MP helped to push my case forward. And I would say, yes, it was resolved finally in, in 2021. And, you know what, I think somehow money is not the issue. I think they forget of the mental pressure that you're put under. And I would say the old experience taught me to be, well, it showed me that I had a spirit of resilience. There were times when I wanted to give up, but I decided I could not give up. I must fight on, even if it's not for my cause, but for those who follows me. And I would say setting a precedence in many regards so that my children would also have such a spirit that even in the sight of the most, you know, I mean, whatever that was, the barrier or boundaries or even death, that you would not give in and that you would stand your grounds. And again, I would say it sort of reminds me of that sort of British spirit, you know, that Churchill mentioned so much of, and that stiff upper lip. And I would say being born in Jamaica has been a blessing for me, as much as when I, you know, look back at the history and think, but my foreparents were taken away from their land in Africa, brought here in shackles. And here I am as a child of such parents or heritage. And imagine when I went to school, all I read about was slavery. There was not really anything positive other than slavery. And I could not understand this. So even when I was trying to ask questions at school, there was never an answer. So I would actually be reading various different books. And again, I would say the 12 tribes, and this is again linking with the Rasta movement. During my early years back in London, it was the 12 tribe that gave me that sort of spirit of not to give in, and one that you belonged. And later on, of course, Marcus Garvey, these words resonated and uplifted me. And I would have had, you know, that during this fight of mine, there's an author, a woman, American, and Dr. Maya Angelou, who has now died. She touched me deeply with her poetry. And I would say there are two, Still I Rise and Phenomenal Woman. And it really touched me. It made me realize that in this world where there was so much discrimination and racial inequality, that I had to admire my mother, admire my grandmother, knowing that as a man, I had to go through so much. And then I considered what it would have been for a woman. And somehow I'm feeling rather blessed, because here I am, connected to some amazing people. I've only known you guys for a short period of time, but the love that I feel, and I would say it's a real blessing. And I would say I've been able to pull myself together throughout this traumatic experience of mine, and to feel in many regards some sort of well, I would say well-being. I feel as though I'm a person, I there is that sort of spirit of, I now have a passport. Imagine, I now have a British passport, and I'm thinking, because I want to travel. And one of my great love is, I do love poetry. And I don't know, Benjamin Zephaniah has been a, yes, he's given me so much to think about. And I recite a lot of his poetry. And I also, my aim is to be a writer where I can document and write in many regards my life, and also, because I'm a chef, to also write recipes and to leave something behind for the generation. And for me, I come from a very mixed family. We have Chinese, Japanese, Turkish, everybody in the family, Irish. So it's like a true melting pot of cultures in my family. And so it's difficult for me to have any, not even a grain of racism or prejudice to anyone, because for me, how can I be after what I've been through and after what my foreparents have been through? So I'm feeling really blessed. I'm again very thankful that the trauma in many regards is over, and I can actually, if you imagine, each time I had to sign in to the police station from Kuwait was every 2 weeks, and each time I'd go there, I was a nervous wreck. And even the officers, I realized, would actually try to help me by, it's all right, Utain, it's all right, Mr. Lindsay, it's all right. They're not gonna send you away. You know what I mean? You're here. We know that we can tell that you're meant to be here. And so yes, it's a great feeling to have a sense of belonging. I don't, as much as I say I'm Jamaican, I'd rather to be, I see myself as an African, and being of mixed heritage. And I'm very grateful of my history, proud of my history. And yes, my aim is to share that experience and my experience with the rest of the world. So again, thank you very much for this opportunity, and I will rest my case. Thank you.
I think we thank you, Utain, and I've got 2 messages in the chat, and people can speak them out if they want. But Bunmi has said, and remember, she's joining us from Canada. She says, thank you so much for sharing your story, Utain. Wow. And Bunmi, and I'm not expecting you to speak back to me now, but it would be really good maybe for you to interview Utain sometime, because his story is an absolute classic of what sadly so many, we say Windrush generation, ordinary folks like you, Utain, should never have been put through that. It's just so wicked. And also Nadia said thank you for such a powerful message. So I don't know if anybody else wants to comment or add to that.
Yeah, I'd like to say thank you to Mr. Lindsay. I've got a Mr. Lindsay from Jamaica as a neighbour,
Really?
So maybe I'll connect you up.
Yeah, man.
David Lindsay, a Jamaican man. That's another thing. But I'd like to exchange details.
Lovely.
I will put my details in the chat for you.
Thank
and
you.
If you can exchange details, because I'd just like to be in touch with you on many different levels.
You know what? It's a real pleasure. And if I just add this, can you imagine, after all the experience I went through, there I was cooking for royalty. The late Princess Diana would come to I worked in some of these most amazing, prestigious private members club in London. And in one of these, Princess Diana, she was a regular. I don't know, there's another place, the Box Club, where the Queen's mother was the patron. Margaret Thatcher, Dennis Thatcher, and the lords and ladies were all coming to. And then all of a sudden, here I am being told, threatened to be kicked out. And I look back, and I don't know if anyone have heard of there's a beautiful place. It's in Croydon, Gravel Hill. It's known as Addington Palace. I don't know if you've heard of it. Mm. Well, this is a place again which holds a lot of memories for me. I worked there back in the early 2000s, I should say. And again, going through racism, and all of a sudden, I was then made the executive head chef of this place. And they got rid of like 3 chefs to put me in that position. And something said to me one day, hold on, do you realize what you've done here? And so for me, it has been a real learning curve. So I'm going to say thank you. And I look forward to sharing, yes, my experience and meeting you all and getting to know you all, because I feel blessed today, and I thank you.
Oh, thank you. Well, I think we feel blessed. Now, McCarthy says he didn't quite catch the end of your story, but he says there's a book there. He says it's a story of grit, determination and resilience. And he says, thanks for sharing. So I think there's a number of you here that there's a book there. And now we can do ebooks. I've been talking to Simon as well about how we can do the technical part of it, but if any of you are capable, then welcome. Because it is so important to share these stories, to understand these stories, because they're stories like June Elizabeth said, of resilience and overcoming, and the positive sides. We know that all the awful sides, but and I'm aware, I think, in this series of sessions that I want to do, that we perhaps will be touching on some of the things that are the more difficult and sadder things, because one of the things that I've found over the last few years of Windrush celebrations and being involved is that the stories have often tended to be some happy stories, successful stories, and yet we know it's been so hard for so many. Okay, Bunmi's put another message in. All the stories today are book worthy. Thank you, Bunmi. We appreciate that, and it's always good to have authors with us, which we've had for the last over the last couple of years, including Velma Plymont, who's written a fantastic book about Jamaica called White River. She joined us 2 weeks ago. And we had Lawrence Scott, who delved back into history and wrote the book Dangerous Freedom, which is a fictional account of the story of Dido Bell. That was very interesting. So I am interested as well, Eugene, with you saying you're into creative writing and poetry. Do you write poetry, Eugene?
Yes, I do. I would, if I would say, I began as spoken words, yeah, and then later on, it seems that, well, I think when others who are in that sort of line of work actually looks at you and think, oh, you're actually a poet, and I was like, me, because so it just shows you that, again, my confidence was not really there. I was doing something from my heart, and in many regards didn't feel that I was brilliant at it. And over the years, realized that actually I'm okay. So yes, thank you.
Right. Eugene, can I ask a favor? Would you mind putting your email address in the chat so that I can email you later about another project that we're working on?
Indeed. Okay, thank you.
Right, thank you. Okay then. So I'm just wondering now, Kwaku, if you want to come in at this point and share some of your experience or whatever with us.
Right, thank you. Well, my experiences aren't going to be as poignant as the previous ones because obviously I don't have a Windrush story. But as I said, I'm to global African history. So Windrush story is part of the stories that I cover. I'm of Ghanaian heritage, born in England. So I'm British and I am Ghanaian as well, very proud of that. What else? I didn't expect it on the spot, but can I just take this opportunity to make a couple of points? First, for June Elizabeth, maybe either in the chat or offline on email, you can maybe furnish me with some more information. I think you mentioned your husband, and where you mentioned in 1960, I think about 1963, there was a delegation from Jamaica that went to Ethiopia. So is that the one you said your husband was involved with? I'll be very interested in that. And also, Liz, if you don't mind, I might want to plead with you. Bear in mind that what you're doing is part of the wide movement of decolonizing, whether to say decolonizing the curriculum. People tend to see decolonizing in a very narrow way, but it's quite wide. All it does is to shift the, what should I say, normative discourse that this is it and everything else is the other. So we obviously, the media that we share impacts on our worldview. Earlier on, you said something that was laudable, but I think it needs to be couched in a different way. You said that every time you start by or awareness of the conflict in Ukraine. Yes, it's sad that people are being killed in Ukraine, but it's important that we don't fall into that. We have to decolonize the news that we get, because at this very moment, people are dying in Yemen. There are conflicts in the Cameroon, Tigray, Ethiopia. There are conflicts there. My brother, I think you mentioned Ethiopia, Shashamani, where Haile Selassie gave land to the Rastafari. They are being victimized and brutalized. So there's a world conflict. So maybe if you widen it up and not just link to Ukraine, but also doing a disservice to the other people who are suffering. Thank you very much, Liz. I thought I will put that out there. Anyway, talking about books, I have done a lot of programs on Windrush, and I think that's what caught my attention for me to come on this particular conversation. And if I should be disciplined enough, I should be bringing out a book next year to just in time for the 75th. In fact, I want to bring it earlier, well in advance of June 2023, which marks the 75th anniversary, because that book corrects a lot of historical. That means it seems historical, but it's not quite correct. There's a lot of wrong information about Windrush. Can I say, when I saw the flyer for last week's event, I was quite impressed, because you're talking about June 27th. And often, if you go on Wikipedia and go in some of these books, they say, oh, Windrush left Jamaica June 24th, which is not correct. So there's a whole raft of mistakes. Or the troop deck fee was £28, 10 shillings. It wasn't £28, 10 shillings. So there's a whole raft of mistakes about Windrush. So I'm hoping that my book can come in time so that people do not repeat that mistake further down the line around June. So I think that's me done, and thank you very much for the opportunity.
Wow, thank you very much indeed. And thank you. It's important when we're thinking about decolonisation, because we need to be very mindful, and it was a really good point that you've made, and I will endeavour to certainly and appreciate your comment there very much. And also we're looking forward very much to your book. Wow. And I do know that the date was wrong, because I contacted my colleague in Jamaica, Vivian Crawford. He's the director of the Institute of Jamaica. And I said to him that we were going to recognise Windrush Day on the 24th, because I'd looked it up and it said the 24th. And it wasn't at all. And so he got back to me, and that's why he showed me that front page of the Gleaner. And yes, you know, we need to get the truth, and we need to get it straight, don't we? Okay, so Nadia, you spoke a little bit earlier. Did you want to say anything else? Add anything else,
Yeah.
Nadia?
Yeah, I'd just like to say thank you very much, actually, Liz, for actually sort of, you know, facilitating this talk. It's the first time I've come on it. And I've found it really interesting, very impactful, and lovely to meet like-minded people, actually. I don't know why I've not been on it before, but, you know, better late than never. And so, yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Well, we've just kept on going, and it's been a real lifeline to me, I have to say, and I've made many friends over the time, I feel, you know, over the air. So thank you for that, and it's great. We're a lovely crew here today. Thank you very much, and it's good to see you.
And you too.
Okay, so I think we're now going to ask June Elizabeth to add a little bit, and then Sharon. Is that an okay way around? And Kwaku's telling us that his music-related activities are on eventbrite.com. Excellent. And Black History activities on Black History Plus. Okay, that's really great. Thank you very much indeed for that. All right, so who's going next? June Elizabeth?
Yes, what did you want me to say? Tell
Well,
me.
June Elizabeth, you have this important role with the Windrush International,
Okay,
with the
right.
Windrush National Team. Just tell us about that context, will you?
Okay,
Please?
right, okay. Let's have a look. Initially, in 1980, when the nationality bill was amended, I had an experience where I went to a meeting, I might have mentioned it before, in Paddington, when Mrs. Thatcher sent one of her social ministers, John Wheeler. That's got a story of its own, but I went into this meeting as a British citizen being born here. Within 15 minutes of his address, he told me I was an alien. So I realized that he said, unless your parents were citizens when you were born, it doesn't matter if you were born here. Unless they were citizens, you were not a citizen. Because no, most of our parents were subjects because they were under the Commonwealth, you know, they didn't get independence. So I realized then that the British law with immigration, when they put that full stop, it can be turned into a comma. So I went in as a citizen and I suddenly became an alien. So that propelled me to travel the length and breadth of the UK. Not only did my brother have a sound system, which he brought from Count Shelley in Finsbury Park in London. So the sound was known as Count Shelley of the Midlands. I had a vast network, and I visited everybody's grandma, granddad, uncle, auntie, and made sure that their papers were completed for their citizenship. So fast forward, that was 1980. So from 1980, I've been a Windrush advocate. And when the scandal broke out, 3 years after, in 2020, 2 years later, I was one of the 41 Home Office voluntary national Windrush community ambassadors. Our role was to promote the Windrush scheme and the Windrush compensation scheme. Now, the Windrush scheme is to help people get their papers intact, help them get their British status. And the Windrush compensation scheme, if they had a story like our brother Uten, right, they would meet the criteria for compensation. So we were not to have caseloads, we were just to promote these schemes. Of course, pandemic came, but I belonging to a wide network and Zoom came about. So I promoted, you know, on all platforms, the schemes. And I realised that the Citizen Advice Bureau were not doing their job. They were getting paid. They weren't doing their job because one of my clients, well, one of the people that I told them they would hear from the Citizen Advice in 2 weeks, which is 10 working days, they didn't. So I saw a lot of gaps in the service. So I became a caseworker. And I've had, to date, I've had 100%. I'm no longer, I'm a Home Office. That was just Windrush ambassador. That was just for a short period of time to propel people knowing about the schemes. So since then, I've had 100% success rate with helping people get their British status and their compensation. So I belong to, my main role of working with the Windrush generations has continued. I will condense briefly as I work with many charities across the UK and abroad, and only mention a couple of the charities. I work in partnership with many Windrush generation organisations, to name a few: Preston, Leeds, Luton, Peterborough, London, Oxford. I belong to the Windrush National Organisation core, like the executive, and I had the pleasure to be involved in the launching of Northampton Guildhall of Northampton Windrush Generation of Descendants UK, of which I'm a co-founder last year. So I think I'll stop there. Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you very much. What
Go
a
on and on and on. Can go on and on and on.
100%
I did briefly mention that what I'm doing Windrush Day. Yes, and also I am advising Preston Windrush Generation and Descendants UK. I'm like an advisor and coordinator, because Anthony Brown went to visit.
That's him.
Yes, he went to visit the Home Office, and I meet with him twice a week, because the Home Office are going to come to my side, right, on the 24th of June. So I am organising it. So I wrote to the head of Home Office, and Nigel Hills, he said that I asked him, could he see if there's any dietary need, and could I have the name and the title of the number of staff who will be visiting, so that we can make the best of the conference a day. So he said he would get back to me. I have a relationship that I'm not allowed to write to. Well, I've been asked by the head of Home Office, that got a new head of Home Office, Gabrielle Monk. She had asked me not to write to any caseworkers. I've got to write to her direct. And now Nigel Hill has taken over, and I have to do the same. So anything I've got, I just scan it straight to the head of Home Office. They respect me for the work that I've done, and they don't want me to not interrogate their staff, but I've been able to transport my skills as a retired nurse, a semi-retired health counsellor for 20 years, an ex-police officer, and a community activist for over 50 years nearly, to tailor make for my clients, so that sometimes the caseworkers, they tell porcupines. I'm just being truthful. So I collate it, and then I use it and I attach it to show them they are contradicting themselves. They ignore me. So therefore, I contact the head of Home Office, and they have to give excuses and apologies for their behaviour, because I said, when you ignore somebody's email, it's a form of bullying. So I have a good relationship. When I'd just done an appeal for compensation, I called for a meeting with the managers of the people who do the appeal. And I brought Glenda Caesar with me as a partner, and I asked for a Zoom meeting. So therefore, I'm helped to break down the barriers in the Home Office, and I will continue supporting my Windrush generation home and abroad. That's just one of the things that I do.
Thank you so much. And I think we've got another book coming along there. I think we're going to have to get yourself qualified or whatever you have to do, Houston, because we've got plenty of people's stories. That's absolutely fantastic, June Elizabeth. I mean, it's just amazing what you're doing. That's really lovely. Sharon, did you want to add anything? Come in again. I'm losing track here. It's midnight. Right, anything else from you, Sharon? Okay, I'm just going to include myself here because you must wonder what on earth I'm doing this. Well, as I explained, we started it off. My colleague Caroline's joining us there from North Wales. We've both worked in Black History Month activities, particularly in North Wales, and we're both directors, part of Learning Links International. We've got a Jamaican director, a Nigerian director, two Jamaican directors now. And Learning Links International has done all kinds of things over the last while. You can look that up. And worked with Yasa Safari, but I got to go to Jamaica way back in 1997, I think. I was invited as a UK representative by the Jamal Foundation because I'm an adult literacy specialist. And so why I had the particular interest in Jamaica was that in Wolverhampton, and again, Caroline and I were both living in Wolverhampton at that stage, there are loads of friends and neighbours who came from Jamaica particularly, and Hanover especially. But I'd worked with many of the people who we'd now consider to be Windrush elders, because they came to college to catch up on their studies after holding down 2-3 jobs, whatever they'd done all their lives and brought up their families. And I was so impressed. We had just such wonderful students and we had really good friendships and we were working on exciting projects. So that's how that happened. So yes, a bit of a mixed background, but so I'm really in my area where I feel comfortable, particularly focusing at the moment on Windrush. I am sorry, Kwaku, I didn't see your hand was up.
Well, no problem. I just want to make a comment about June Elizabeth, but before I do, I thought I'll touch on Utin because I checked him out and then I saw Twitter, but I realized that he's not really active on Twitter. The last thing he did was to retweet Jeremy Corbyn, something he agreed to do with the Windrush generation. So yeah, what I wanted to say about June Elizabeth was that, yeah, I commend the work she's been doing. And particularly, I think the first time I met her, I think you live either Northampton or Nottingham. I have to tell you, anywhere north of Watford, apart from Birmingham, where I schooled briefly, it's like beyond yonder. So I'm sure it starts with N, if I'm not mistaken, Nottingham or Nottingham. Anyway, the point being that I did a Marcus Garvey event at the Jamaican High Commission in London. And for someone to come all the way from outside London like she did, I was quite impressed. Because you can imagine you do these events in London and people find it difficult to come just from South London to these things. But she's very, was an ardent fan of African history. And she, just like she showed you a Marcus Garvey plaque, she brought a book to show me, do I have this, which on Marcus Garvey, which I did have. So I just want to pick her up that, you know, for the hard work she's been doing for a long time.
Definitely, we'll big you up, June Elizabeth. Thank you ever so much for that comment. That's brilliant. Okay, I think we've all had a turn to go round, so we're going to wrap things up now. And what I usually do is just go back to the PowerPoint and pick things up from there. So and look at any other Black history information or updates. Now, if you hear about anything, please send information to me and I can put it on the PowerPoint. And last week it was a real breakthrough because I learned how to put the PowerPoints onto as attachments on the website. So sometimes it's a bit more simplified. I don't put all the elements on because of the size of it. So I've included here what you just shared with us, Kwaku, that your music activities are posted at that address, and your history activities at that address. Now, what I'll do before I post it is that I'll make those live links so people can just link through. Okay, just to say here that this week it was, oops, a daisy, sorry, going back here, that it's Joe Biden announced that it's National Caribbean American Heritage Month in the US. And I think things are changing slowly. I like to be optimistic at times. Okay, this is something that's coming up on June the 11th. And this is this yours as well, Kwame?
Yeah, Kwaku, yes, it is.
Yeah, okay. Do you want to talk about this to us, please?
Yes, obviously most people that have heard of Claudia Jones and Marcus Garvey. So this conference, what the remit I've given to presenters is that let's hear a bit more about what we don't know, we don't tend to hear about. If you ask someone about Claudia Jones, for example, they will default to the Notting Hill Carnival. And that's a contentious thing because quite frankly, I posit that Claudia Jones had nothing to do with Notting Hill Carnival. It started after she had died. She did the Caribbean carnivals and for many, many years, but she died in 1964. So I'm hoping that people are going to bring things that we've not heard about. Marcus Garvey, people locate him in America, for example, or Jamaica. So what about England? What was he doing? So you hear some of the stories that are not common. So that's the idea, and that's why it's called repairing histories. We're trying to go against the grain of some of these things that we hear that may not be historically correct, but they quite entrenched. So yeah, that's it. But anyway, like you put it there, you can just click that link and find a bit more and book if you want to. It is free and it's on Zoom.
Okay, that's fabulous. So I've put the link bit down at the bottom here because I've taken it off the poster, so that would work live. It doesn't work if I show you now because I'm on shared screen, but it is work live in when you see it. I also saw about this that I thought was interesting because I'm very interested. You were talking about decolonizing the curriculum. I think we need to decolonize ourselves, and you made a very good point then there, Kwame, and I shall remember that one. But this book sounds interesting. Kojo Koram, Uncommon Wealth, Britain and the Aftermath of the Empire. I'm just going to read this bit. Imperialism led to eye-watering profits for the British. Yes, too true. And after decolonisation, those who had grown rich from the colonial project rewrote the rules to keep the coffers open. Rhiannon Davis speaks to Kojo Koram about the economic and legal effects of decolonisation and how the growing global inequality has its roots in empire. So this is this should work live. I hope it does. If not, then just look it up on the internet again. But what's really interesting is that there's often authors are interviewed, and then those interviews are posted online. So you can find out a whole lot about the book, even if you're not able to actually get hold of the copy of the book, but there's always libraries. I've got too many library books and I've just had a demand to have them all back, so I'll do that. And this is just a little bit more about that story. Yes, oh, this has passed now, but we need to get the copy of the recording. I do apologise, I forgot that. And that's the Pioneers of Indian Arrival Day commemorations in the Caribbean. So looking at indentured labour and the different stories of things that we've looked at in the past, but we can do some more. Just to remind you that I've been busy in Wales trying to do remove racism. And include Black history in the curriculum. So that's a particular interest of mine that we're working on. So I just have to say thank you very much indeed. And if there's anything else anybody wants to add about anything coming up?
What
Or
we're
if
going
you-
to do next week? Sorry, I missed. I can't remember.
We've
Oh,
got
it's my birthday. That's it. Yeah.
we're singing happy birthday to you, but apart from that, we've got this speaker who wrote the book about Windrush that I showed on the
yeah.
initial slide. I'm not quite sure what else is going to happen next week. But I'm
Yes,
sure
I saw her. I attended Black Heroes Foundation just when she was launching it, and she had that book out a couple of years ago, and I bought a copy. Yeah, very nice. They're lovely. Yeah.
relaunched it again. I can't just think of a name at the moment. Again, I apologise. Time of night.
Yeah, I've got the book next
Okay,
door.
so we look forward to next week. If you can make it, join us. If you can't,
Yeah.
then we post the recordings.
Yes.
And I thank you all very much indeed. I'm going to stop the recording now, but we can carry on chatting after the recording stopped. Thank you.